Kuinua coaching. Kuinua coaching.
Well, welcome to the Kuinua podcast today, everybody. We've got John Robinson with us today. Hi, John. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And I'm so pleased you can join us today because I'm really going to quiz you on your area of expertise. So, John, do you want to just give us a bit of a kind of background of who you are and how you got where you are and what you do now?
I always wanted, air quote, real jobs for my day jobs. I didn't do waiting tables or bartending. I worked in corporate environments, and then the anxiety meant that I was, I prioritized keeping those jobs and financial stability over sort of what I was really trying to do and wanted to do. But it's okay. I wound up doing something that was just as fulfilling, if not more. During this, one of the jobs that I had was a sales job. And at some point I decided, why don't I take some of my acting training and apply it to, when I'm working with prospective clients and dealing and helping them out once they're on board. And it worked great. It worked fantastically well. I wound up winning a bunch of big sales contests, doing well. And over the years, I've decided that, this is something that I can teach. In fact, one of the things that made that happen was about the time I was doing sales, the TED Talk era started. And I'd see all of these psychologist speakers, and they were suggesting tools to use that were, what can I say? They were identical to acting exercises, just using a different vocabulary. And that's when it really clicked with me that, I have something that's of value to a bunch of other people that I need to bring forward. If you fast forward a bit, I had a job that I absolutely loved and the people I loved, and I had bought into the be your authentic self, be yourself, be yourself, be yourself, as if that's one person in a box. And because I loved the people I was working with, I thought I can just do that and not use my other, the technique that I'd developed. And I wound up in the hospital 3 times with a blood pressure of 212 over 118. So it became pretty obvious I needed to have my, other me's, if you will, at my beck and call, because that's what helped make me functional in the world. And that's when I really realized, okay, I've got to step back from corporate. I was up at VP of marketing. I may have mentioned that. That's the level. And I had to step back and say, no, it's time for me to bring this out into the world. And one of the places that it became very obvious, and this is great because it's a leadership podcast. That's what Marie is all about, is that improving leadership. Leaders that are in transition, and that includes first-time leaders, just promoted into leadership roles. That can also be leaders moving from one department to another, a lateral move that might require different, well, I said require already, but that has different requirements in a new role, or new ones moving from one company to another. And this is just such a big area to help them step into the new role. Usually they know the what, they know what they need to do, but they're having trouble changing their behavior to actually do it. And that's basically where I come in.
This is such an interesting topic because we hear all the time about behaviors and how we behave towards people. And I think, as we were talking about earlier, people have got many different facets and dimensions, and they can use all these different skills and use them as tools to help them through life. So when you talk about using alter egos, how can you do this authentically, and how does it help?
Well, the first thing that you have to do is keep in your mind the idea of a whole self. There is a whole self, but when they say, be your authentic self, that's not just one version of you. That's very limited. It's all of these things that we do. And we do this in real life. How do you talk to kids? You're probably very expressive, and you're going to repeatedly delete little syllables and be very, but when you're talking to your boss, it's probably a little bit more like, hey, this is what's happening on my project. When you're talking to your customers, when you're talking to your spouse, when you're alone without the kids, you have all of these ways that you act very differently. One that I love is the idea of how do you act with your very buttoned up friends versus how you act with your very, very lovely inappropriate friends. None of those yous are inauthentic. So how do you consciously do this when you're in a situation where you don't naturally go into a you that can handle that situation well? We all have weaknesses, right? And when we know what we need to do, but we don't know how to make ourselves behave in the way that is appropriate, then that's where you can consciously make an alter ego. It's really a different facet of yourself. It's not something fake or put on. It's just developing a part of you that's going to do the job that needs to be done.
So what would be a good example of this? Say I was trying to sell something and I wasn't very confident and I was scared of kind of talking to people. How could I kind of use this alter ego technique to boost my sales and to be better at that area of things?
Well, on the general, large brush going across the canvas version, you might look at a character such as Wonder Woman, Superman, who knows that by what they're going to say to this person, it's going to be a way to save them, right? You're helping them out immensely, and you're going to find a way to become Wonder Woman for that moment, right? It might not be something that's going to be Wonder Woman. Maybe it's just somebody that you work with and you have a little bit of an idealization about who they are, but you'd like to become them temporarily while you're on the phone. Sometimes it's just a version of yourself. So it can take any number of forms. I do have a system, of course, to systematize it. I love to repeat words and versions of the words. Once you've systematized it, you then have the ability to consciously go through it. So there's 4 steps I like to use, a BOLD, and it's sort of boil it down, finding out what it is you want and who you think can do it. Observe, which is where you kind of list out all of the triggers, all of the anchors that are in the environment. And then L, label, where you come up with the name for who you're going to be. And you also label all of the things you observed as kind of, I can change this one, I can't change this one. You filter out what are the things outside your control, what's in it. And then do is taking all the things you can control in L and putting them on. How can you dress to help trigger the new behavior? What can you do? Things you can do to trigger the new behavior instead of letting, you react the way you always react to those triggers.
This is the most interesting part, I think, the actual doing part of it, because when you're acting, you can be asked to do a certain scene and you can do it, but you might not do it as confidently without a lot of practice, because it might seem completely alien to the way that you normally behave or how you might portray it. How can you kind of get your confidence up to believe that you can not only do this, but embody this part of who you want to be?
Well, there's multiple tools, and some of them are, once you've picked sort of who you're going to be or what characteristics you need to have, if it's still going to be, for admin, I'm ADHD. In addition to the anxiety, I'm ADHD, and admin is my kryptonite. But it needs to get done. There's just admin-y things that I can't delegate to somebody else, right? So they don't need to be done perfectly, but they need to be done. So in short spurts, I can become, Secretary John, basically. I don't even need to be a superhero or something. I think it's fun. I think most people like to use these tools to embody a superhero, but I always like keeping it more myself. Secretary John, he can do, all of the spreadsheets and fill in the forms and, talk to different vendors and such. And that's great, but other people can't. So that's one way of using it and one way of kind of deciding who it's going to be, but to actually build up the confidence to bring that in, that comes through really making it automatic. You decide what things are within your control, right, in that environment. And you say, for admin John, I might move my glass on my desk from one side to the other, only while I do admin work. When I'm done doing admin work, I put that glass back, because if I do that 2 or 3 times, that's going to move me into a different mindset automatically. It's an anchor. And to be honest, I don't wear this most of the time. This jacket with the collared shirt, I only wear this when I'm sort of being in the public eye. If I'm giving a speech somewhere or I'm doing an interview like I'm doing with you, And the same thing goes for this ring. Normally I just keep my wedding band, but I can put this ring on and off. It's a very easy, quick thing. It's subtle. Nobody else will notice it. But for me, I know it's there and it triggers different behaviors for me. So sometimes you take a little bit of that burden. What you're doing is you're taking that burden off of you trying to be super confident to step into that role. And you're kind of putting it on these things that you're altering in your environment and on your person and letting them do the heavy lifting for you.
That's really interesting, because I've seen some actors that have been reported to have said, I couldn't really understand the role, I couldn't get into it, I wasn't able to access that person, but when I put the clothing on and the accessories on, it completely brought that character out in me. So there's something in that, in dressing for the part that you want to be. Absolutely.
And it can also be things that are more physical, like posture. Amy Cuddy, if you remember Amy Cuddy, everybody who's looked into how they modify their behaviors. I know some of her research where they threw out the baby with the bathwater because she was talking about the hormone levels. But the part where it's the postures works. Actors for millennia have been using that. That's something that we learn. If we're like this, we're just not going to be as powerful. If we're like this, we feel more powerful. It's part of that character work. It's like putting on that costume. And you don't even need to be an actor to use these things. Jerry Seinfeld would famously, for a long time, he'd put on a jacket before going on stage because that would make him not be everyday Jerry. It would be now on stage comedian Jerry. Now, and yes, he is an actor, I know, but there are examples of this everywhere. Athletes use it a lot. Various performers, when Sasha Fierce for Beyonce, things she would do for there. But there's no reason you can't use it in the C-suite.
Do you think that you have to practice in front of a mirror a few times to kind of get a handle on maybe looking at yourself with maybe different clothes on and thinking, and imagining it? Do you need to do visualization? What are the techniques around that?
You can use anything. One of my favorite things to do is I'm going to step back for a second and say, often just changing your clothes is more than enough. I put the jacket on, I put the suit on, and I change my posture. It's just something that I do. I don't even think about it. It just happens. I actually had to think about it to go like this, where I know a good chunk of the day I'm going to be doing this if I was wearing a t-shirt. So that's one thing. Some of it just happens automatically. Other things, like putting on the ring before starting the interview, take a little bit more time to happen, but I didn't really have to rehearse it. I've done it before for other things, and eventually the association for the behavior just happened naturally. I think it's really important for people like in this audience, in your audience, Marie, to not have to practice it too much. If we create an obstacle to using it, then nobody's going to use it. So let's take away the obstacle. There's still hard work. There's no silver bullet, as we know. So let's see what we can do to make something, a tiny change that after only 2 or 3 times doing it, suddenly you've got a big change. And that's the beauty of the thing. We're not trying to teach you to act. This is not acting teaching, right? We're not making you into Marlon Brando or Meryl Streep, but we are giving you some tools to use this quickly and efficiently and effectively. And it's, a bespoke purpose. There's a certain thing you're trying to achieve. You're not going to have to go into 50 hours of rehearsal for it.
I'd actually like to challenge our listeners at this point as well to go away and try this and to see if it makes a difference, because I found that this makes a huge difference. When I was training executives, when I put on a suit, it was a completely different person. It was like you say, you put your shoulders back and you can breathe better and you can vocalize better. But if you're wearing jeans, it's not the same feeling. It's kind of forcing yourself to do the same thing and be as professional. And this is why I found it very difficult with dress down Fridays or Wednesdays or whatever, because when you go in and you're wearing your own clothes, you want to be yourself and you might normally be reserved. But when you're at work, you haven't got that opportunity. When you need to get on the phone and you need to make a call or you need to go into a meeting and portray a sense of authority, doing that in a pair of jeans, I mean, that's kind of the reverse thing, isn't it? Putting you in a pair of jeans and then trying to make professional, that's even harder. How would you go about trying to do that? You're listening to the Kuinua podcast. If you want to ask a question to our experts, just go to kuinuacoaching.com and you will find the link to the podcast where you can leave us a voice message or send us an email and we will ask your question direct to the expert. That's kuinuacoaching.com. Kuinua Coaching is set up to offer mentoring, coaching and courses in leadership, negotiation and soft skills. If you're interested in finding out more about what Kuinua Coaching has to offer you, you can get in touch via Facebook, Instagram, you can type Kuinua into Google, you can email us on kuinuacoaching@gmail.com or go to our website at kuinuacoaching.com. That's kuinuacoaching.com.
Well, let me just make sure I'm clear on the question. We're asking how to make you more of a leader if you're dressed down?
Yeah, so when we were talking about if you put a suit on, you can kind of visualize yourself being the leader. But if you're then on a dress down day and you're not in the right kind of, because when I'm in the wrong clothes, it takes me out of the right mindset. You see what I mean? So if I'm then going into jeans, what do I then need to do to kind of bring back that mindset to be able to do what I need to do?
Well, there's a few things you can do. One of the most powerful things that you can do, and it fits into the D, it's one of the things I have people do when they get to D, is music. There might be a soundtrack for that business you, right? So before you go into work, as business you, as dressed up, you're going to listen to a particular song, right? Before you go in. You do that, say, the rest of the week. By the time you get to your dress down Friday, you've already got that song, you hear it, and it's going to be the thing that triggers you. It's Pavlov, right? It's the bell ringing for dinner, even though it's not dinner time. And when you get to Friday, you now play this music. You're going to find that you're going to take on that posture anyway. Now, you'll also want to have some sort of a prop. So for me, again, it's this ring for the most part, right? It can also be sort of like a yoga mudra, mudras being things that you do with your hands. So another subtle way where if something starts to come up at work, you can just, touch your fingers together or something, and it'll bring a certain feeling into your body, right? One other thing is to simply try to go to work a few times where you've got a mixed dress. If you're working somewhere that allows business casual, maybe you've got the really nice blouse on and the jacket, but you are wearing jeans, where you can start to associate some piece of clothing you're going to wear on Friday to how you behave already. Or you can cheat it and do the opposite way. You're supposed to be dressed down, but you know what? Who's going to care if you're wearing the blouse without the jacket? Are you going to get called out on that? Probably not. So kind of consciously over the rest of the week, associate your shirt with how you're going to feel, kind of, think about that, notice it. By the time you get to Friday, if you go in with the shirt with jeans, you're going to notice that helps you be in the correct mindset to actually be productive.
What would you say to somebody that might say, oh, that's all well and good saying I should wear a shirt, but how do you expect me just to wear a shirt and then get a whole leadership mindset and behave professionally?
Well, it depends again on the circumstance. People, again, with suits, if you put on a suit, it's very natural. People don't have to think about it most of the time. Although I will say there are more than a few times I've played the James Bond theme after putting on a suit. It's just awesome what happens after that. But I would say for the most part, I would bring up Pavlov again and say, look, if you consciously associate some part of your clothing, which is something you always have control of, it's not like I always have to have this meeting in this conference room. The boss won't let me be anywhere but in this conference room. And it's always got to be these three people. I'm just holding up two fingers. these 3 people in the conference room with me, and I can't alter these things, but I can alter my clothing. I can alter where I sit. I can alter a few other things that might be around me sitting on the table, right? And you just work with those and you put them in new places. That works as a pattern interrupt. Psychologically, those are called pattern interrupts. Wonderful. Then not only are they pattern interrupts, but they also become new anchors. So if you consciously say, when I put this here, I'm going to act like that, 2 or 3 days of doing that, it's automatic. I put this paper here, I'm good to go. So yes, actually, you can just put on a shirt, but you can't just do it willy-nilly. There is no silver bullet. You'll probably have to consciously associate it to something before the just putting on the shirt will have the effect you want it to have.
How conscious do you have to be of the room around you? So say you're doing this and you're feeling you're doing what you need to do to feel confident and acting like a role model that you might have, but the room's not really getting what you're doing. How conscious do you have to be of other people, and what kind of changes do you need to make if it's not working out?
This backs out from the do to the L, the label, which is, what can I change? What can't I change? If you're stuck in a particular room and it doesn't give you the vibe, and sometimes it does give you the vibe, some rooms are just perfect for the who you need to be in that situation, just perfect. But often, what you just said is probably, I would say more like 70, 80% of the time, you're going to be stuck in a room that doesn't gel with who you need to be. So you're going to focus not on the room. The room is no longer your focus. The focus is always going to, just again, like say I've got, folders here, and I'm going to place that, and my paper that I'm going to refer to is going to go here. My glass will go there. If I'm allowed to sit somewhere else, that one is a great pattern interrupt. If you keep sitting in the same seat every time you have this meeting, there's nothing more powerful. Okay, music might be more powerful, but I'll say few things more powerful than simply moving from that seat to a different seat outright. It's amazing and that is one where seeing the room can kind of help a little bit, because you're seeing it from a new angle, both literally and metaphorically.
How kind of connected to other people do you need to be? So if you're kind of you're changing your behavior and you're using one kind of facet of yourself and it's not kind of working, what's the way of adapting to understand what you can use and what you might need to use to interact with different people?
Well, we do this naturally already a little bit. It's usually subtle enough that nobody catches it, but when you're dealing with the person that you find tends to like to argue with you, right? We all have at least somebody that we have to interact with who looks for something to tear down what you're saying to them. You're going to behave differently than the next person who's really one of your good friends at work. You never see them outside of the workplace, but you get along with them while you're there. So they were sort of your work confidant. And you could be talking to them literally one after the other, and they could see the other person there, but it's such a subtle shift that has to happen. They don't know it. One of the fun things about this is that that'll happen again, but a little bit more gradually. You have strong behaviors set. You have strong triggers set for each person. And when you create a bit of a pattern interrupt, they may still react to you the same way that they did, at least for the first couple of times that they're dealing with you. They may think that you're handling it much more effectively, but they won't know what to attribute that to. They're going to still think that you are you and you are you and you are you. Whereas in reality, you can feel the difference in yourself, how you're dealing with the situation. The only thing that they'll think of is they handled that better than they usually do. It'll be too subtle of a shift for them to go, oh my God, who is this person? That doesn't happen. But they'll notice that there's a shift and that when you then talk to the next person, they're just shift. It'll just seem a little bit better than it used to be. And over time, they'll notice that your personality while dealing with them has significantly changed. But it takes time for them to see it. You get to reap the benefits of it more immediately. They'll need a little bit of time to adjust. And that's how it goes.
I'm really interested in your viewpoint on, do you need to understand your own values really well to do this? And how far away from your own kind of core can you go? So if you wanted to be in sales and your idol was the Wolf of Wall Street, would you necessarily go there, or would you pick something a little bit close to yourself?
Interestingly enough, I met Jordan Peele. Jordan, God, what's his last name? Oh, well, I met him, the Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah, don't do that. Your values, I think of it with your whole self. Your whole self is the ultimate driver of all of these yous that you slip into and out of all day long. And part of the thing that makes sure that you are your authentic self is that you don't change your values from one you to another you to another you. You may have to alter, say, superficial ones. One from sports is that, maybe you like to be fair. You like to be fair in real life, in regular life. But being fair on the court, if you're playing somebody who's not as good as you, that can lose you a lot of matches when really you should have been the person to win the match. So that's one where it's semi-superficial goal for what you're doing and how important it is to do at that level. Ruling by consensus, right? You like to be egalitarian, but now you're transitioned into a leadership role. And as egalitarian as you can be, the problem is at the end of the day, you are the leader. You need to make the call. You need to inspire others to be able to make their own calls as well, and not to mire down in 20 hours of meetings to figure out what probably should have been figured out in 3 minutes. So how do you deal with these more surface level things? Well, you have to work with it. But if it's sort of the big values, treat others fairly, treat others with respect, make sure that they treat you with respect, love, right? Try and do good. If I see somebody getting hurt, what am I going to do? If I see someone getting hurt on the street, do I step in? Do I not? All of these sort of the big things, and including then what you have to do in business, because you can have like I just discussed before, there's sort of sub values, your business values. Am I serving the customer? Am I bringing value to them? Right? Make sure that those are really set. If you do not follow your internal compass, that's when switching into these different roles can go awry. And that's when people start to feel like you're the stereotypical used car salesman. They can feel the fakeness going in there. And the thing that makes it feel fake is that you are no longer going by your value set.
So, John, we're coming up to the end of the interview now, even though we could talk for a long time. Would you like to give people an indication of where they can find you on the internet?
Absolutely. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. I do have a Twitter handle, but I gotta be honest, I'm never on Twitter. Facebook is my platform of choice. I am on LinkedIn as well. So you can go to any and all of those. I suggest Facebook and get into the boldly.work community. We have a nice group on Facebook for discussing all of these things and to support each other. And it's just a lovely place. Also, I do have something I would love to give Marie's listeners from this. If you go to boldly.work Kuinua, so /Kuinua, boldly.work /Kuinua, there you can find the workbook that we often like to use and bring people through that BOLD method. And you guys will be the first ones to be given this whole thing without having to actually be on a coaching call or on doing a course with us. So I'd say go and grab that sucker. If you do, please think about registering for some of the other free things that we do. It's great to get people in the know, even if they don't actually take a class or a course. I'm a big believer that even just the knowledge that it's out there is very important and helps you in your regular day. Even, things that we even just discussed today are already things that you can act on right now. So please get in touch, join the community, and we would love to have you.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that workbook as well. I'm going to be going and downloading that and having a look at it because I'm really, really interested in this. And everything is linked below, so you can just go through and click. If you're on the podcast or if you're on the YouTube channel, you can just click on the bottom and go straight through and find this. And if you want to look at other episodes that we've actually been talking about before this, we've got Daniel Lee, who talks about the first building blocks for leadership, and Aidan Nepom that talks about improv with your leadership. So these are all kind of slightly interrelated topics. It's been absolutely fantastic having you on as a guest today, John. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Marie. I enjoyed myself quite a lot.
You've been watching on YouTube or listening on an audio platform to the Kuinua podcast. If you like what you're hearing, then don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any amazing content, and don't forget to leave us a review.
Kuinua coaching.